At age 3, James Leininger began sharing vivid memories that stunned his parents, stories linking him to James Houston Jr., a World War II Navy pilot shot down over Chichijima on March 3, 1945. These accounts were just the beginning of a series of striking details that challenged our view of reincarnation.
As a toddler, James began experiencing terrifying nightmares about a plane crash.
The screaming was not like a normal child crying. It was a panic-stricken, terrorized screaming.
He was too young to explain the dream, but he could draw.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
As James grew older, he began to speak in detail about the aircraft despite having no prior knowledge of World War II or the military. What's truly astonishing is that James is just one of many children around the world who share eerily similar memories, raising questions no one can quite answer.
I think what the research shows is that for people who are open to considering the possibility that there is evidence that consciousness at times can exist separately from a functioning brain. If you look at the best cases, they provide evidence that at times there can be this carryover of memories and emotions that seem carried over from one life and continue on in another.
Andrea and Bruce say they weren't watching World War II documentaries or conversing about military history.
This is an F-18?
No, that one.
So what explains the nightmares and James's strange obsession with airplanes? As time went by, Andrea didn't know what to believe. Here's James at age 3 going over a plane as if he's doing a pre-flight check. He would continue to say and do things that were puzzling, like the time his mom bought him a toy airplane.
And I said, oh, look, there's a bomb on the bottom of it. He said, that's not a bomb, Mama, that's a drop tank.
A drop tank?
I'd never heard of a drop tank. I didn't know what a drop tank was.
James's parents, initially skeptical, were forced to reconsider their beliefs as their son's memories grew more specific and accurate. As his parents investigated further, they discovered a chilling connection to a man named James M. Houston Jr., a fighter pilot who had died during the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945. James's descriptions of the pilot's life were uncannily detailed. He spoke of his family, his aircraft, and the battle where he had met his untimely death.
I remember one time where James was talking about his airplane, and he said it was a Corsair.
The Corsair was fast. Agility was very good.
I went to the internet, started to do some research, found out that there was no Corsair that flew off in Natoma Bay. And since there was no Corsair on Natoma Bay, all these memories, to be polite, it was just baloney. And all of a sudden, there's a picture, James M. Houston Jr. standing in front of a Corsair. James M. Houston Jr., before he was assigned to Natoma Bay, was in a Navy squadron that flew Corsairs.
After an emotional journey, James met members of Houston's family, including his elderly sister, who was convinced that James was the reincarnation of her brother. This extraordinary case forced the Leininger family to confront a reality that most people never experience: the possibility that the soul could live on beyond death.
His parents cautiously made contact with James Houston's only surviving relative, his sister, Anne. At first, she didn't know what to think about the little boy who claimed to be her brother, reincarnated. But then, James asked her for a painting that only one person other than her knew existed. James believed then, as he does now, that it was the dead pilot's soul asking for that picture.
As James's memories became more detailed, he exhibited knowledge that seemed impossible for a child his age. He spoke about the Corsair aircraft, a plane notorious for its tendency to veer left on takeoff, something only experienced pilots would know. He also described his crash with startling accuracy, claiming that his plane had been hit in the engine before plunging into the ocean. His parents began documenting everything he said, piecing together the fragments of his recollections. The more they researched, the more their skepticism wavered. It wasn't just the knowledge of planes and war history that unsettled them. It was the emotions behind James's words, the fear and anguish of a man reliving his final moments.
Well, he did three things very quickly. He gave us the name of the ship. He then told us, he gave us the name of a man that he flew with named Jack Larson.
Yeah.
And then he gave us a location where his plane was shot down.
Sure.
Well, what I found out by contacting a veterans organization, never expecting to confirm this name Jack Larson, I asked a guy named Leo Pyatt, do you remember a guy named Jack Larson? And he says, oh yeah, he flew off one day and we never saw him again. So it led me to believe initially that that's who had been killed. But we discovered later that there was only one man killed during the Battle of Iwo Jima, and his name was James M. Houston Jr.
But James's case is not unique. Around the world, similar stories of children who remember past lives continue to surface, each one offering its own puzzle to solve. One of the most fascinating cases comes from Scotland, where a young boy named Cameron Macaulay began sharing memories of a life he claimed to have lived on the remote Isle of Barra.
Cameron believes that his family name was Robertson and that he lived in a big, white house, full of children. He says he had a black and white dog. There was a view from the house to the sea, and that they could see planes land, but on the beach.
At the age of 4, Cameron began speaking about a white house on a hill overlooking the sea, the car his family had driven, and other details of his life that seemed entirely out of place for a child who had never been to the island.
The planes must land on the beach.
At first, Cameron's parents dismissed his stories as childish fantasy. However, as the years went on, his memories became more detailed and the family began to take notice. Cameron would describe places and events with such clarity that it was impossible to ignore the possibility that he was recalling a life from the past. When Cameron was 6 years old, his family decided to visit the Isle of Barra to see if any of his memories could be verified.
When they got back home, Norma decided to get in contact with a genealogist and hire her to look into the history of the Robertson family. And it was discovered that that family was indeed from Glasgow and they had owned that house for over 20 years. And she was actually able to trace someone back to the family. Her name was Gillian Robertson. Norma was able to get in touch with her and they actually went to go visit her. She said that there was a black and white dog that lived at the house as well.
This story offers compelling evidence for reincarnation, showing how a young child's memories of a past life can be verified by real-world details. But Cameron's case is just one of many that challenge our conventional understanding of life, death, and the soul. In the United States, a young boy named Cade had memories that defied belief, describing events from the tragic day of September 11th when he was only 3 years old. Cade's memories began when he started speaking about his life in a tall building, seeing the Statue of Liberty from his office window, and eventually dying in a collapse. These details mirrored the experiences of a man who had been working in the World Trade Center when the towers fell.
He became obsessed with planes. Everything, kind of the pieces suddenly came together like a puzzle. The planes, the tall buildings. This person was at the World Trade Center.
The plane hit the World Trade Center, then it got stuck in the building. When I was falling, I was still alive, and then all the rubble hit me. I didn't feel anything because I died.
What makes Cade's story even more eerie is that at such a young age, he could describe events with a level of detail that seemed impossible for someone who hadn't been alive at the time. His intense fear of airplanes and tall buildings seemed to confirm that these memories weren't just the product of imagination. They were real memories from a past life.
What was also strange about Cade's case is that he started insisting that his name is not Cade. He completely rejected his own name. And Cade had a past life name, but Molly has decided to keep this secret as she's worried it could be a victim and wouldn't want to share information of someone if it happens to not be connected to her son. So she's never said exactly who she thinks he is.
As Cade grew older, his family and others began to question the nature of his memories. When Cade's mother shared his story online, she discovered that the life he described aligned perfectly with that of a man who perished in the World Trade Center during the 9/11 attacks. These stories raise questions that science has yet to answer. Could it be that the soul persists beyond the physical body, carrying memories from one life to the next, whether it's the life of a fighter pilot during World War II, a family living on a remote island in Scotland, or a victim of the 9/11 tragedy? These children's memories have proven to be uncannily accurate, forcing us to reconsider what we know about consciousness in the afterlife.
Some of these cases are very hard to dismiss. It's a phenomenon of consciousness, that it's not literally the wound on the previous body, but more the previous person's awareness of that wound sort of scarred their consciousness. When the consciousness then enters a new body, that wound then manifests as a similar wound or defect on the body of the developing baby.
What makes these cases even more fascinating is the fact that many of the children who recall past lives do so without any prior knowledge of the events they describe. Their memories aren't influenced by books, movies, or conversations with adults. They are simply a recollection of a life that once was.
Well, there are physicists who talk about basically new universes bubbling out of current ones where it's an infinite number of universes. And if it's truly infinite, it means that at some point there'd be this same existence we have now that would be redone. So yeah, it all gets rather mind-boggling.
As the lines between past and present blur, one question arises. Could reincarnation be real? The experiences of these children offer compelling evidence that the soul may carry memories from previous lives, experiences that span time and space in ways we don't yet understand. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider supporting the channel by checking out the link in the description. See you in the next one.